Yep.
Permission, elders?
You have
You have
permission.
permission.
Praise God. Thank you. Okay. Just getting into the feel of what we're just doing. So I just want to thank everybody, because when we're talking about resistance, we're looking at it in different realms. Thinking about Dr. Parker, how he's looking at we are resistant through learning how to problem solve and doing math, so we can learn how to problem solve what the oppressors are doing to us. And then we just had Dr. Reed just talk about, just the slave revolts and how we resisted with that. And so I ask you to think about, what is your definition of resistance? Because what does it mean to you? It means those things that we just heard, but I'm looking at resistance from the lens of just our identity, and our Blackness alone becomes a resistant in a sea of whiteness, right? So we're going to use art, and how art is in our identity becomes a form of resistance. So again, I want you to think in your mind, what does it even mean to you? So you got 3 different definitions just today from the presenters, but you have to think about, what does Black resistance mean to you, and how are you doing that? The definition is to refuse, the refusal to accept or comply with something. What are you refusing to accept or comply with anymore as African Americans? So then you're going to be also resistant. So, and thinking about our identity as resistance, and brother Dr. Parker talked about Malcolm X a couple of times and used this quote from him, so I got one too. So it says, we must recapture our heritage and our identity if we are ever to liberate ourselves from the bonds of white supremacy. So this is really what art does for us. And we're going to look at an artist. We are the Black Doses Collective in Philadelphia. And so I found a Philadelphian artist that really used his art to kind of use that identity as resistance. And you may know him. Some of you may know his name. He's no longer with us, but he's Barkley L. Hendrick. So he's a painter, but he's also a photographer. And I think there's a new exhibit. They are bringing him back in New York, and bringing his work back and looking at his photos now, not just his paintings, which he was more known for, but now they're looking at his photography. So he was born in 1945. We see that he was born in North Philadelphia, near the Tioga section in Philly. He graduated from Simon Gratz School in 1963. Then the brother went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and he graduated from there in 1967. He enlisted in the New Jersey National Guard, and he found some work with doing arts and crafts as a teacher at the Philadelphia Department of Recreation. So he is really Philadelphia bound for a good time in his life. And then in 1970, he went to Yale University, and he graduated with his MFA, Master's in Fine Arts. And then he became a professor there, and he continued to be a professor from 1972 to 2010. So he died in 2017, but he was like a professor for a long time in Connecticut. So, but Barkley L. Hendrick, and we looking at Black resistance, and I think when you look at the theme, because this Black resistance is also the theme for ASALH, for the Association of the Study of African American Life and History. This is the theme for the whole year for Black history, right? And so when you read that theme, you see a lot of our resistance. It does start with slave revolts, like Dr. Reed was saying, but a lot of sometimes our Black resistance came really powerful in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s with the Black Power movement. So in the mid-1960s, what happened with Hendricks is when he was touring Europe, he fell in love with the portrait style that the European artist was doing. But however, while he was in Europe, he found that his own race was absent from Western art. So that left a void in him that troubled him. And so as the Black Power movement gained momentum, what Hendricks did was he was able to change what he saw in Europe by correcting the balance. He used the life-size portraits of friends, relatives, and strangers that he encountered on the street, and that communicated a new assertiveness and pride among Black Americans. In these portraits, he attempted to imbue the pride, the dignified presence upon his subjects. So when you talk about our image, our pride, what we look like becomes a resistance for white folks that may have us looking in some other kind of way. So the art really started to do that. So the Black Power movement The Black arts movement comes out of the Black power movement, right? So Black art movement was the name that was given to the politically motivated Black poets, artists, dramatists, musicians. So all of our arts become a way of us being resistant, right? And we got Amari Baraka, you know, he was head of that, and the movement lasts from 1965 to 1975. But my thing is, it's still going on in the arts. And it's really about us using the arts, and they were tasked in using the arts to try to really promote, to help us with the struggle for freedom. So now I just want to kind of have you look at some of the work that Barkley did that shows you that our Black resistance, just from the color of our skin, our pose, our stance, anything, our cadence, is what we do to resist all this whiteness or the standard of white beauty. Is our beauty. So this one is one of his popular works, and it's called LAWDY. So you think like that, you know how we talking already. That's our resistance too, our language, right? LAWDY Mama was in 1969, and he did this portrait. And this is one of his portraits that shows the feminine form with integrity, while also alluding to the Byzantine and medieval religious icons. Just when you think about that sentence alone, I don't know if people know about Kahandi Wiley. When you think about how he uses those images of Black bodies and mixing it with medieval religion, like even with, if Mary is holding her son, Jesus, taking him off the cross, having a Black mom holding her son who might have been murdered. So we use these images in art. Barkley was doing this before Kahani Wiley was doing it, right? And this particular image, he's using the iconic images and thoughts of Kathleen Cleaver, Angela Davis. You got that Afro in there, the Black Power movement. So he's using his art, he's using our identity to represent how we resistant just from our skin tone and our hair, right? So this is just a powerful image. And this is also his second cousin that he took this image from, but it also is kind of showing some of the other Black Black Panther, Black Power leaders. Another art, a loved one. I love the title of this. This is resistance. Our identity alone is resistance. It's called Icon for My Man, Superman. And so, and then he takes a quote from Bobby Seals, who you know is like the co-founder of Black Panthers, and says, Superman never saved any Black people. Okay, so Superman, he wasn't out there for us. So it's just like us just really being real and coming into our own, and art does that, imagery does that. Our image, again, has been resistant. Anytime we show up, when you have a society that's built on whiteness, the image of whiteness, museums that show all whiteness, books that talk about whiteness, whatever, anything we write, paint, draw, or say is our resistance and showing up in our space. So this is one of his works too, and I love this. And then he got this artwork. This is another famous one from Marvin Gaye's song, you know, it's called What's Going On. Now he did this 3 years after Marvin Gaye released his song, but still it's just showing us in who we are, you know, our Black elegance, how we stand, how we pose, our different shades, everything. So, you know, without reading all that, just wanted you to kind of look at these images and see how powerful and beautiful they are, and know that that's a part of Black resistance. Art is part of that. So now I'm just going to show you just images just for you to just look at and just feel it and just feel proud of it and know that like Barkley Hendrick was saying, when he went to Europe, he didn't see us, but he came home and made sure he showed us, and everyday folks showing us and showing our beauty and our Black elegance. And that was this resistance. Just check it out. Just look at the poses, the stance, the colors, the range of colors of our Black people, all beautiful. This one on the left is him. So it's a portrait of himself. A lot of photographers and art, you know, they take pictures and then they paint those pictures. So they'll be drawing or painting from a photography that, a photo that they have, and then they'll paint. So you see how cool and slick he looks, and see how cool this brother looks. And I just love this imagery. I just love it. All of it.
It's beautiful.
It's us. It's us. Just being Black is resistant. It just blows my mind. It's powerful. Our hair, our skin. So this is a little bit of photography. I'm just going to show a couple more and I'll be done. So this on the left is him. and a younger version of him taking photos with his camera. So he did a lot of self-portraits. I didn't show a lot of that. He did a lot of pictures of himself that he painted, and he took self-portraits. And I was thinking it was going to be kids here, so I didn't want to show some portraits, but he got one called Brilliantly Endowed, where he is nude and he's showing all his body and he is proud of it. And it's called Brilliantly Endowed. And it was a comment and reaction from a art critic, a white person, making a critique about his art and using derogatory words like, oh, he's trying to be slick, or using this words to kind of describe Black folks is, one of the words was slick. And he just rebelled against it and say, okay, you want to talk about my work and how I'm showing my folks? I'm gonna show you all of me. And he just did a nude photo of himself. So the brother was like, really keeping it real. I don't know if people in the museum, we know Jamal, what's his name, Jamal Shabazz, people in the museum that we done exhibits on him. So before Jamal, you have this street photography that Hendrick was doing. Just image of everyday folks, you know what I mean? Just being who we are is resistance. I need to add this real quick. A lot of times people say our Black joy alone is resistance when they always want to talk about struggle and pain of who we are, and they only relegate us to trauma. Just us being joyful and being who we are is resistance. Sister girls. And I want to end with this poem from Gwendolyn Brooks, and it's called Primer for Blacks. And it's just a little part. The poem is definitely longer, but I just wanted to use this kind of excerpt from the poem. The word Black has geographic power, pulls everybody in. Blacks here, Blacks there, Blacks wherever they may be. And remember, you Blacks, what they told you. Remember your education. One drop, maketh a brand new Black. Oh, mighty drop. And because they have given us kindly, so many more of our people, just that one drop. So thank y'all so much. And I want to stop sharing my screen.
Hey, Val, someone would like you to share his name again.
Oh, Barkley
Barkley.
Barkley L. Hendricks. I'll put it in.
I'm going to give you, if you have any questions and you want to put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand on, your little Zoom hand to be acknowledged, please do so now. I actually have a question or a comment for Dr. Carol Lease.
Yeah.
You mentioned quite a few, you made reference to quite a few books and stories. Is there some kind of way that you can share those with us? I got a few, but maybe didn't get some correctly, like the John stories, and you were talking about, was it High John or High Jop that you could
High John the Conqueror. I did not write down any of his books, but you can search on Google for any particular titles. I'm not, those children and young adult books I have upstairs. But if you just type in High John the Conqueror.
The Conqueror.
Yes, Conqueror. Yes, High John the Conqueror. And that's from a very famous, as I said, root. As actual root that people use. And when you went to see the man or the woman who practiced hoodoo, that powder or the root they would probably give you for a particular spell, or, you know, or whatever.
Okay.
Or it helps in gambling, I hear. Don't know that for sure, but it helps you with gambling. I one year told ghost stories in the Germantown area, and a story by Charles Chestnut called The Conjure Woman. And I dressed up in, you know, period clothes, and I had a broom, and it was actually in like a stall, almost, you know, that was on these people's property. And one time I was telling the story, and this cat came in, and people were in there. I was in there, I had the broom, and the cat just wound his way around my legs, and I didn't move. And then I had a bag. I don't know if you remember, sometimes scented soap would come in these little flowered bags. And the
Okay.
soap had crumbled, and I put it around my neck. That was supposed to be my mojo bag. And so the leader of the group took everybody out, you know, because the next group was coming in, and this one guy held back. And I was like, why is he holding back? We're in this enclosed space. If he comes near me, I'm gonna hit him with this broom. And the story was so believable. He said, you know, he was going to court, and could I give him something to ensure his win in court? And I gave him some of that crumble up soap.
Oh, did he win?
Yes, I gave him something because I didn't know what this man was, you know, mentally, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yes, happy about it. So yeah, Charles Chestnut has some interesting stories. But if you Google High John the Conqueror, the other one was The Doctor to the Dead. It is still in print. Well, it was reprinted by Georgia, I think Georgia University Press. Very interesting story. There's a mermaid story in there.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And Ebo's, oh, never mind. That was just mentioned in reference to Daughters of the Dust. You
No,
said
Ebo's, I first heard Ebo's landing, and I'm about an hour and a half from that area. I'm right at the North Florida, Georgia border. And I first heard that story told by storytellers, the Quimby's, Frank and Doug Quimby, in 1986 at the National Association of Black Storytellers Festival. It actually is a place. In fact, someone sent me a copy of a newspaper article where some Nigerian dignitaries came over maybe about 10 years ago and had libations and, you know, blessed that spot. It actually exists. The story is easy to find. I've seen it even on Facebook.
okay. And the last one, the Book of Negro Folklore.
Yes, very famous.
Okay.
Likes to use it on a bontemps. Very, they have old sayings, rhymes, like some of you may remember hearing Miss Mary Mack all dressed in black.
Oh, yes.
24 buttons down my back or whatever. All of that is in there. All of that is in there.
Okay.
The Book of Negro Folklore.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
I'm still looking for questions, or if you have any that you just want to ask, feel free. Going once?
I'm sorry. I
Mike.
have a question. I have a question for Professor Parker. And you mentioned that math was a way of modeling the universe. And I presume you mean the world that includes the world we live in as well. And I'm wondering if that includes, in addition to the physical, the social conditions. Can we use math to model the social conditions that we see?
Definitely. So within, and I'm glad you asked that, because within the hystematics framework that I've been developing, it's broken down into 5 elements. And one of the elements is experiential learning models. And where, you know, because I've been able to study certain aspects of our history, study certain aspects of political science, sociology, as I've been going through and developing a deeper understanding of different levels of mathematics, I see so many parallels, like in terms of just, like, for example, like Black radical tradition, like as it ties into like Black resistance. When you solve, as an like we talked about Bob Moses the other day, radical equations. When you solve a radical equation in algebra, it's essentially a 2-step process. Your first step is to isolate the radical, and then eliminate the radical. So when I see that and I realize that, I make that connection between, like, I start thinking about COINTELPRO, and I start thinking about the Black Panther Party and like political prisoners such as Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly H. Rap Brown, who is still incarcerated as we speak right now. The same way you do the math and solve certain types of mathematical equations, it serves as a model for like how things are done, how things are actually carried out socially in different societies. And it's really interesting and fascinating to me. And that's one of the things that propels me to just keep like studying math deeper and deeper. One of the things that I'm working on is I really want to, I don't have as strong of an understanding of calculus as I would like to have. So one of my goals is to really develop a deep mastery of calculus, because I'm very much an advocate of nationalism, Black nationalism or Pan-African nationalism, right? And one half of calculus is integration. Integration is one half of calculus. Of course, it doesn't mean the exact same thing, but I'm certain that there are certain elements of integration within calculus that I hope to use to prove why nationalism is the more formidable method for us to Black people to achieve liberation. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up comment.
Mhm.
I read one of Bob Moses' books, The Algebra Project. And what I found really fascinating was how he taught kids, young children, about the number line and positive and negative. He took them out on the subway and used the subway line as the model for showing children the difference between positive and negative. And I thought that was the way to get it across to children in a less abstract way. Something that was more tangible, that they could understand, that was practical. And it was also in a way that was fun and turned into a field trip. So I just wanted to mention that as a great way to go about teaching children math, which I do agree with you, I think is very important.
Yeah, I love all those types of examples. I remember something similar, like in being in Philadelphia and riding on SEPTA. And when you look at the SEPTA map, when you're thinking about the coordinate plane, the XY plane, how you have the vertical axis, that's your Y axis. We can think of that as the Broad Street line, right? Going north and south. And then the horizontal axis, or the X axis, we can think of that as the Martin Frankfurt line, right? So yeah, I mean, and that really is one of the key elements to having young people and even adults really understand mathematics, is taking it out of the abstract and making it more practical and more of an everyday thing. And since you bring that up, that's really my goal in like writing How to Use All This Math Volume 1 and Volume 2 that's going to come out subsequent to it, is taking everyday experiences, just regular experiences, and just showing how algebra and geometry and even pre-calculus is embedded within all of that already, and then making the connection. One of the projects that I'm going to be working on in the future is, linking up with some barbers, right? Because every time you get a part at the barbershop, those parts can be modeled as graphs. Or, but you wouldn't think of that, but we deal with that like a lot of times in advanced algebra or in pre-calculus, right? But we sit in a pre-calculus class or advanced algebra class, and it feels like abstract and real cold, and it feels irrelevant in the room. But yet the same young brother will go to the barbershop after school and get those designs in his hair. But the issue is like, how do we bridge the gap? So that's what I'm really trying to do. That's one of the major parts of my work, is showing how to bridge that gap. Because once we can bridge that gap, we can let people see how the mathematics that they've been conditioned to be afraid of and they've been scared of all their lives, they've already been doing it. They just didn't know that they was doing it.
Right.
So now once you let people know, oh, I've been doing this all along anyway, now I just need to know how to, speak the language of math and speak the language of the algebra and the geometry and the pre-calculus and the calculus. Now it's like that changes the whole game. Because now we're able to compete on their terms. you know, I shouldn't say their terms, really the terms of our ancestors that they co-opted and then kind of marketed as if they were their own, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see a number 1 down here in the chat, so I'm going to look and see what it is.
There is I see a question in the chat, if I can answer it.
Yes.
Explain,
Please
yeah,
explain
cui
cui
bono.
Uh-huh. Cui bono. So cui bono is a Latin term which means for the, I think technically it translates to for the good of whom, which more loosely it can be translated to like who benefits. So this I see this as being important when we examine social issues, especially social problems in our community, because oftentimes when there's a social problem, we recognize the problem and we recognize who was affected by the problem in a negative way, but oftentimes there's not enough emphasis on who benefits from it. Because sometimes we think of something as, you know, from our own perspective as is normal as human beings. You know, for example, like if there's gun violence in Philadelphia, that's a problem, right? Because we don't want, you know, young people getting shot, you know, we don't want people dying from, you know, gun violence. But in order to solve the problem, we have to think about who benefits from that and do a serious analysis of who benefits from that. So who benefits from that gun violence? Because once you start to really unpack that and identify the beneficiaries of the gun violence, like, okay, well, because we could say, well, you know, if, you know, real estate developers may benefit from that, because if we can say, well, in these communities and these zip codes, there's so much gun violence and there's drug dealing, then that's going to drive down property values. So then when it's time to gentrify, we just come through as a real estate developer, I come through, I buy up all the property for cheap. And then, you know, then somehow all of a sudden magically, well, you know, the gun violence ends. We can, you know, get rid of the so-called, you know, bad actors that are committing the gun violence. And then now we can sell $500,000 houses, right? You know, police can get overtime, you know, because we can say, well, there's gun violence over there, right? So when we start to think about like, and then, you know, a lot of that is, it also maintains a certain status quo. But oftentimes we think about like the harm and only those that are harmed. So there's not a balanced analysis. When we start to think about who benefits, then we can start to say, okay, well, the way we solve this problem is we have to disincentivize it. And oftentimes we don't really think about, at least a lot of times in the media, a lot of the conversations that I see, it's not about the disincentivization of the problem. It's about, we want to solve the problem, but we look at it in terms of only from the perspective of the victim or the recipient of the problem and not those that benefit. Because if we start looking at that, we might recognize that some of those same people that are benefiting from the problem are pretending to be on the side of those that are being harmed by it as a good old-fashioned con game, right? Then once you unpack that and unearth that, then you start to see, okay, I see why this isn't being solved. I see why we're having the same conversations in 2023 that we were having in 1983 or 1993, because we always focused on who was being victimized and never who was actually benefiting from it, you know? So that's what cui bono attempts to get to, who benefits. Then if we start the analysis with who benefits, then, you know, we may get some different results and some different outcomes. But of course there will be resistance, because that, like I said, it's a con game and they don't want us thinking like that, you know? And again, this is a mathematical way of thinking. So it's a mathematical approach to addressing problems, which again ties into my point of why they have to condition us to believe that math is too hard. We're not intelligent enough to excel at it. It's irrelevant to our lives, and we should just, you know, it's just a class you got to take and just pass any way you can, but you don't really want to learn it. You don't really need to learn it, right? Because then you won't even start looking at the world in a different way. So the concept of cui bono will just be so beyond you. But then you won't, you know, because once you start thinking of looking at the world that way, now it's like, okay, now I understand what's going on here. You know, so you may have the group that is, you know, they may donate $100,000 to end gun violence, as an example, you know, tax write-off, $100,000. But at the same time, they may be profiting financially, $100 million a year, right, from the same issue. So it's like, you know, but what will be advertised, right, is the $100,000 donation. The $100 million will be kind of low key and under wraps. right? So until we start to kind of like, you know, think more mathematically as a collective and think about like, well, who benefits and, you know, who's benefiting, then we'll be able to, until then, we won't really be able to solve these problems.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Jewel, any further questions?
I don't see any.
Okay.
There are no more here. Last call, though.
So we're going to close with a poem by Cheryl Boyce Taylor. She's an award-winning poet, poetry instructor, author, and social worker. Her two latest books are Mama Fife Represents and We Are Not Wearing Helmets. Her life papers are stored at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York City. Cheryl Boyce Taylor. You're on mute.
Greetings, everyone. Do I have permission from the elders to proceed?
You have permission.
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you. I bring you Juneteenth greetings from Brooklyn, New York. I'm grateful to be here, and I will share this one poem which speaks to my Black resistance. I am a poet to keep producing words and fairness in the world, as well as to keep my family's dialect and culture alive. This piece is called Black. She be a Black woman, born between a town's whisper and a slither moon. She be Ibeji woman, born in hard crop guava season between calabash and cassava. She be the dust of Arima Mountains. This skin is a Black language, cadent and regal, brown of the cola nuts from which all nations rise. I carry the wail of tribes in my skin, my mouth jeweled with Africa, would lay down my life for this Black skin. This skin is a temple. This skin is a temple where the gods meet, where the gods meet to shout perfection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Nice.
Okay, goodness, we have been having such a good time, but all good things come to a close. It's the truth. I want to thank our presenters for sharing their knowledge and experience. And also I want to thank our guests for their support. So to find out more about Black Docents Collective, go to our website. And our website address is blackdocentscollective.com. I would like to leave you with this. There's an African proverb that says, knowledge is a garden. If it isn't cultivated, you can't harvest it. Asante Sana.
Auntie Sana.
Asante Sana.